this is great stuff, but the standard is the standard. If you guys can't produce this at HD quality, this is going to be nothing more than a science project. So at that time, he basically said, hey, you gotta achieve this. Well, we thought this was an impossibility. But nevertheless, we took on the challenge and we set out for it.
Welcome to Icons and Insights powered by C360, where the business of sports, technology, and broadcasting converge to create the immersive media economy. Now let's get into it with your hosts, Howard Wright and Cher Jones. So every good company, every good CEO, every good anything, movie, whatever, has an origin story, Howard. And we're going to dive into your origin story one day, but today it's not about you. Today it's about the origin story of C360. So I want you to tell me about the guest that you selected for us to be on the show today.
So the guest is a board member, confidant, co-founder of the company that we're a part of right now. It is upon his shoulders that we stand and strive for excellence. None other than Evan Wimer.
Evan, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Howard, for that.
Well, we are excited about diving in deep because, every company, as I mentioned off the top, they all have their own origin stories. It's kind of like that meme, how it started, how it's going. And that's what we're doing today is a check-in with you. And I would love for you to just set us up. It's like, Sophia, picture this. C360, 19, and I'll let you fill in the blank with that. So tell us a little bit about C360, the origin.
Well, it really came about from some relationships that we had in the broadcast industry. And we also had a little bit of knowledge of some technology that was developed by the US government back in the 1950s. And so from that technology, we had cobbled together a 360 basically demo that we wanted to share with some of the people that we knew in the industry. So Tom Sahara at that time was with Turner Sports, and Tom, what a great guy and great inspiration he has been, not only to me, but to the industry. But he was not convinced to meet with me for about a year. I'd been pinging him and talking, to him about this. And finally, he agreed to meet with us in Atlanta. So we went down, and the premise of the whole meeting was we were going to demonstrate this 360-degree capability to him in the conference room. So Tom came in, we set up this kind of primitive technology that we had cobbled together. And before we knew it, we were streaming live in 360. Tom kind of quietly got up out of his chair. It was just Tom and myself and a few other people. He leaves the conference room, and then about 5 minutes later, he comes back with more than a dozen people. Unbeknownst to us, we didn't know that other companies were pitching him at that time on 360 capabilities, all of which had miserably failed. And so here's this little company in Wexford, PA, that comes into Turner Sports, says we're going to do this. We set it up, we do it, and they're really just in disbelief that we're showing them a live stream in 360. So in a very short span of time, Tom said, "Hey, listen, let's try this out with NASCAR." So we got an opportunity. We kind of got a paid gig right out of the gate. We thought we were doing great for 6 weeks in the summer series, and so we show up the first week. Things could, they come off perfectly, no problems. And Tom said, well, look, I think we can go live with this. So we go live with this the second week, and things continue to roll. Turner starts doing some research on all of this. And before we know, we've got over a sample size of 1 million viewers that have been looking at this. And their average dwell time on that second screen experience was 1 hour and 9 minutes. That was unheard of. And this was like in 2011. So of course, Turner got very excited by all of this. And they said, well, let's try this out in another sport. So they immediately brought us into the PGA, and we started doing a couple events. Now they did some more research at that time, but it wasn't quite as good as NASCAR, but it was still pretty good for a second screen experience. So at that point, we kind of thought, wow, we're jumping onto the rocket ship. We're about ready to blast off. This thing is going to go great. And then Tom, in Tom's way, just came in and said, well, look, this is great stuff, but the standard is the standard. If you guys can't produce this at HD quality, this is going to be nothing more than a science project. So at that time, he basically said, hey, you gotta achieve this. Well, we thought this was an impossibility. But nevertheless, we took on the challenge and we set out for it. At that time, we were probably streaming around a VGA, maybe even sub VGA resolution. So in order to get to a 1080 output, we had to be something greater than that. And we were at about 15 frames in that early technology. And Tom's like, it's gotta be HD, it's gotta be 60 frames per second. So that to us seemed like it was gonna be a pretty hard achievement. But we endeavored to get in and start, working the technology. Never thought that it was gonna take us 5 years to actually get there, but it did.
It's like 5 years for overnight success, right?
Exactly. But on the heels of that, we were waiting for technologies to mature. There was sensor technology, codecs, things that needed to happen. But all along, we were filing patents because we were convinced that this was the future. And so we were doing work in the background while other technologies were getting ready. And then in 2000, basically 17, we were able to build our first prototype that could actually deliver a 1080 resolution technology. And from there, we started getting immediate opportunities and traction in the industry. So we again thought, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this thing is going to take off, and we're going to just be rock stars and all of the things that you dream as an entrepreneur. And we found out that the technology, even though it was a great resolution and a higher frame rate, color didn't match other broadcast cameras. The workflow wasn't, seamless in the integration. So all of a sudden we recognized, there was a lot more work left to do. Matter of fact, probably some of the hardest work that we had to do. But happy to say that where we're at today is that we've, fully integrated into, pretty much all the network productions. We've got great relationships, and it's been a great ride. But there's been a lot of moments, a lot of days when we've gotten up and said, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are a testament to, I don't know, stick-to-itiveness, business acumen, technical acumen. One of the things that stood out to me when we first got to meet Evan with you and the board was, this is like the best kept secret, unintentionally, of course, in immersive media creation. Can you talk to us about, you get that first bite or nibble even of success with Turner NASCAR, and then lo and behold, we look up all these years later and the broadcast partners that we have now. That it doesn't happen through osmosis. It's lots of hard work and a little bit of luck. But tell us about the next deal that became the next deal that became basically working with all the broadcasters in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, so, I want to give a lot of credit to, Mike Davies and Fox Sports. After we kind of had cut our teeth with Turner and TNT, Mike was early in on this. He really saw the advantages of what we were doing. Though our color was an issue and workflow wasn't there, he saw beyond all of that. So he really did foster C360, in its early infancy when it really started to become a powerful tool, and gave us opportunity to get into these events. And other networks were paying attention. I mean, ESPN, CBS, all of them were kind of waiting to see where all of this developed. But our first really kind of major contract, if you will, came through ESPN. And they had this great, I'll say, interest in embedding it in the pylon technology for NFL and college football. And so we took our wide angle field of view that we could capture, essentially everything that was in front of the camera, and developed our replay system at that point, based on kind of ESPN's request to make this happen. And so again, very short period of time, we get through that development cycle. ESPN is excited. We end up signing a multi-year deal with ESPN, and that gave us some of the runway that we needed at that time to kind of get the technology to the next level.
So you've talked about now these barriers to entry. Folks think that maybe you could put a GoPro camera in a high-profile place and have the focus, fidelity, 60 frames per second, megapixels per frame, when those of us in the industry recognize that is it's a immature view of the technology. You have these successes with the sports and entertainment technology kind of vertical. How and when did you guys decide to say, okay, we're going to work with the United States Navy, United States Air Force? We have literally some of the highest maintenance customers in the world, and the stream has to be, perfectly clear every single time we need it delivered. You talk about the dexterity and the kind of the duality of the business model where you can serve those verticals that are that important.
We almost have to go back to the origin story in the sense there were two fundamental things that we were focused on from the beginning. Number one, the stitching. We did not want to stitch together a 360-degree point of view. We knew that in terms of reaching the fidelity that you talked about, being able to have that pristine image, that any kind of stitching was going to create barriers for us to be able to create a linear experience for the broadcasters and a streaming experience for the fans. So non-stitching was primary. The second piece was being able to actually do something in sports that was actually for the linear broadcast. We knew to get to a fan experience, we actually had to create value for the linear partners, the Fox Sports and NBC Sports and ESPN and others. They had to have some kind of production value in the live event. And so that meant we had to have replay. That meant that we had to have operators that could actually be a part of that production. Beyond that, the streaming component, which is what we did first for Turner Sports, is really what we were focused on from the very beginning. But to get to the streaming part, we had to kind of go back to the whole production capability and the ability to deliver a linear broadcast. Now, I'll be honest with you, we weren't originally thinking about aerospace and defense, but I give Boeing a tremendous amount of credit. When we did a pitch to a group out in Pasadena, one of the gentlemen involved was also on the Horizon X deal flow or deal team for Boeing. And when he saw what we were doing with the fidelity that we were doing and all the innovation that we had introduced, he immediately saw the value for some aerospace opportunities. Now, I don't think he knew that day how prolific and how far our technology could actually impact the aerospace industry. But nevertheless, we started having dialogue, and before we knew it, here's Boeing wanting to invest in little old C360 in Wexford, Pennsylvania.
And thanks and shout out to Martha Cosgrove and Michael Lohnert, the savvy investors, the savvy tech dollars, and Boeing and Horizon X that have taken a couple bites of the apple of investment and equity partnership with C360. That cannot be understated. Not everybody sees the vision in terms of this immersive media economy that we see, that we live, that we occupy 10 to 12 hours of our day every single day on this mission. As you think about all this convergence, Evan, there are aerospace and defense, there's sports and media, there's entertainment. It's the same IPs that we hold very dear to us, but as the bigger picture, how can we be make our mark in this $1 trillion immersive media economy?
Well, Howard, it's a great question, and one that you know very well how hard we're working at. But it's really, I think throughout history, when technology kind of begins to change perception and accessibility to certain industries, that people want more, and we've seen that for a long time coming. In terms of that fan experience, that ability to control kind of on a one-to-one basis, your ability to watch a particular player or interact with a team in a way that you don't have access to today. So I think what has started driving us in the beginning and started really becoming apparent to us over the last decade was this technology at C360 could really provide something that would change the way that people consume sports, interact with sports. I mean, we knew sports betting at some point would be legalized. I mean, here it is. We're at the starting point of kind of all of that converging. So the fact that you can actually now track a player through XY data that's being generated, from an event, and our cameras can watch every player all at the same time, and anyone in that experience can pick up that metadata, pick up our stream, and pick and choose any individual player that they want to watch, and then beyond that, start to statistically interact with that whole flow, and from a betting standpoint, actually start placing prop bets in the middle of an event. I mean, this is something that people talked about, for a couple decades. But here we are, and C360 really is the platform that kind of brings all of that together.
And that's like an immediate, I want to touch on this because I think this is really important. It's like, that's the immediate future. And you see all of that, all of this technology, as you guys are talking about, converging and becoming this whole immersive experience. And we know, Howard, and how you evangelize the immersive media economy. And that's a perfect example of that. But Evan, where do you see, so that's like the immediate future, but if you were to project a little bit further down the road, what opportunities do you see, especially considering the broadcast rights? They have to bring that value and to justify those enormous contracts that they have over the next 10 years. So where do you see it just slightly beyond what you've described right now, which is almost the immediate future?
So in sports, I mean, it is upon us, but it's into the future. It's the gamification. I mean, it's how people almost are jumping into the event themselves. There's so many reasons I'm impressed by Howard, but he immediately, when we first met, said, putting that individual on the playing field, and he got it. He immediately saw it. So that's been the vision, and that's ultimately, where it's going to be, where you're really almost totally immersed in the game itself. But the technology flows out from there across aerospace, for instance. We've done some preliminary work in plane inspection. The technology literally could scan an entire plane that's just landing to look for any defects that are on that plane in essentially real time. So, we think about the things that we can do from a safety standpoint. And with our U.S. military individuals, we are capable. Right now, we're starting to save lives, but we're miniaturizing this technology. It's going to be on their bodies, right? It's not going to be, a half a pound camera. We're talking about micro cameras that are going to be able to actually show the battlefield and be responsive in a way that that isn't available today. So I think there's medical applications, there are energy applications, there's autonomous vehicle applications. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. And that's been one of our biggest challenges from the beginning, is how do we just focus on the few things that we know we can do very well, and then we're going to start growing this out across multiple industries.
Evan, can you do us a favor and the audience a favor? RoboEyes, please explain in layperson terms what that is and how we did it. And then equally as important, the fleet visual inspection that we did for the Navy in San Diego a couple months ago. Both of those two things are just so fascinating to me. I would love for our listeners to understand what we're actually doing with the armed services.
Yeah. So RoboEyes was really, again, a godsend in so many ways for C360 because, at the time, and it's horrible to think about this, but COVID had just hit. Our sports business had really come to an abrupt stop. And fortunately, we had already applied for a U.S. Air Force SBIR Phase 2 program or award. And the day that sports stopped, we actually got news from the Air Force that we had been awarded this sizable contract to develop RoboEyes. And so the U.S. military or the Air Force have kind of a number of vehicles, robotic vehicles that go out and, in layman's terms, basically dismantle the bomb or get rid of the bomb, if you will, without jeopardizing human life. So they had a subpar, I'll say, visual system to actually do that. And the whole program was around giving them a stereoscopic, high fidelity image. And literally we're delivering now 4K to each eye. So essentially it's 8K in the resolution. And so the quality of our RoboEyes now on these robotic arms and robotic vehicles give the operators this incredible ability to see a wide angle field of view and also a great depth perception to what they're doing. So effectively what we've done is we have cut down the mission time and we have increased the success time of the mission because of the quality of what we're doing with RoboEyes. And we've got applications beyond just kind of the robotic arms. I mean, this can be effectively integrated into mid-air fueling applications, and the list just kind of goes on and on. But with the Navy, we were down selected from 300 companies to just 5 companies to actually make a presentation this past spring in San Diego. And we're not per se a known quantity, or we're the best kept secret, right? The military really didn't know a whole lot about us. They knew about RoboEyes and they were impressed enough to kind of throw us into the mix. But we get to San Diego, we actually demonstrate how C360 can help the Navy look at these open water incidents in a 360-degree point of view around their ships. And apparently, I didn't know this, it happens quite frequently. They needed a way to be able to get ahead of the story, if you will, and be able to, basically have factual, accurate information so that other incidents or countries wouldn't be able to, spin it a certain way. So the Navy has looked at the technology, and then out of the 5 people that were selected, we actually won first place in this Fleet 6 competition. So we went from really not being known, down selected to 5 out of 300, to actually being first place with the Navy. So I'm proud of the team and the tech and all we've been able to accomplish, over the last couple of years.
Talk about how it started and how it's going. Right? That is phenomenal. And you look at even with how the maturation of your team and the people it's almost like, I'm going to go with origin story. So I'm thinking Avengers Assemble. And that's literally what you're doing at this point is you are assembling the right cast of players to move from where it started to where it's going. And talk to me a little bit more about this team that you put into play, because you were at the helm. And then at this point of the juncture, it's C360 is growing and making that decision now to bring Howard on. What was that like? And then going further from that?
Well, really at the end of the day, once I met Howard, it was an easy decision. But up until that point, I was really wrestling with that. And we could see, especially with COVID, that, we needed someone, a special individual that would actually be able to take all that we'd accomplished and open up some new relationships for us. Because we had kind of, gotten to a point where we weren't able to go as fast as we needed to. And in order to advance the company, I just, I knew that there was a moment where I was going to have to say, okay, I brought it to this point, but as a CEO, we need to hire a professional CEO. We've got to be able to build on that person's relationships and that person's experiences to kind of take us to the whole next level. So with Howard joining the team, it's created a tremendous amount of just excitement and energy with our developers. But, up to that point, we had put together a pretty impressive development team, simply by being able to pitch the vision. I mean, when they could go anywhere in the world, they could work for anybody, but they decided, to stay here in Pittsburgh. They decided to be able to work on a project that for them is challenging day in and day out. It excites them. I mean, I talk to them all the time and they love getting up in the morning and going to work. So, we've got their enthusiasm, we've got their intellect, which is impressive. I promise you, they have these conversations at such a high level. I got to record it. I go back home, I study it. I'm like, what are they talking about? And then finally I can digest it. But we have a great group of people, and it's led by our CTO, Brian Lowry, who I've known honestly as a friend for 30 years. Again, trust him like a brother. He is like a brother. And, he just is one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. And he has, just this incredible ability to see into the future, but to be able to pick the pieces up where they're at today and start to build on that so that we end up where we want to be, in the future. So that's the team, and can't believe we're at where we're at. Feel like we're climbing into the rocket again and ready to blast off. So we've got some really big I'll say, contracts, but a really big project that we're working on right now that is going to change. It's going to change sports. It's going to change people's lives. And,
real cryptic on how we describe that one, Evan, or this has to be embargoed for a while. Before we get to that, the operative word is and was and continues to be team. Cher, I was lucky enough to be around some of the best and brightest at Stanford, some of the best and brightest minds at Qualcomm, some of the best and brightest minds at Intel. I have never been more impressed with the business acumen and the technical acumen. You want to talk about your team, Evan? You mentioned Brian and his, I don't know, he's kind of a specialist in neuromorphic behavior and the study of the brain and how you decode and encode all these neurons and everything else. But I think about Stephen, I think about Sherry, I think about Dave, I think about Akash and Pierre and Warren, of course. How did you compile this, small little Avenger team from CMU, from Pitt, from Penn State? How did you get everybody together?
So, I mean, they really, and I'm going to say that most of them were in the Rust Belt, if you will. I mean, they were hidden gems from Buffalo, New York, over to Ohio State, CMU, University of Pittsburgh, up to Michigan. We just, we started with a few people and we started building the tech. And then, we had some relationships that helped us from an HR standpoint, make some introductions, but, we vetted a lot of people before we decided on who it would be. And, each of the development team, each of these individuals that you mentioned are, spectacular, but it was just kind of turning over every rock that we knew how. And just over time, it took us whatever, 2 years maybe to assemble the team. But we're ready to grow again. We're ready to add more, and we'll go through that same process. We'll just keep looking until we find the right person.
Good. That leads to the continued business maturation, the capitalization of it, the product enhancements, and then the expanded partnerships. And so again, we're going to speak in kind of code here, but if we've been a supplier of streams to the broadcasters, pays us millions of dollars at very good margins, and we like that business. This next, I would say revolution, not even evolution, in terms of Gen 3, working directly with United States sports leagues, a league. It's not named the league, but could you describe in the abstract what we're trying to do so we don't get in trouble with any of the commissioners?
Yeah, let's not get in trouble here.
So, I'll give this particular league a lot of credit. Again, they've opened up opportunity for us to be able to show them our capability and what we're talking about doing, and what we're actually starting to implement with them right now is a transformative application. I mean, it will change the way that sport looks at their operations, the way that sport looks at production, if you will, and probably most importantly, they are really dialed in on the fan experience. And I think to date, most of the leagues have done a phenomenal job, right? Building their brands and taking care of their players and doing the things that they need to do to be successful. But it's been a pattern that's been proven over the last 50 years of broadcast to, it's kind of like, here's the things that we have to deliver to have the fan watch this at a certain time on television. Mm-hmm. And the demographics that we're really, targeting, they don't adhere to those kind of, I'll say, presentable kind of, presentations of sports. So they want something deeper than that. And this league really understands that to do that, they've got to basically, make it available to every fan to have their own personalized experience, that they can watch who they want to watch, how they want to watch them. They can interact with that player. They can look at every stat. They can go back and look at highlights from other games. They can, they can place a wager if they want. They can buy a jersey if they want. They can do things that makes them closer to the sport, that puts them as close to the sport as they can be, other than, being on that particular playing surface. It's actually putting them in the best seat in the house and being able to actually get access to things that they wouldn't be able to get necessarily, but from the digital platform.
Wow. This is next level sports. This is the evolution. And we're talking about that right now. And quite frankly, C360 is right at the center of it, right at the epicenter of this change, of this immersive media economy. We're definitely, I'm excited to see what's next based off of what you're describing and what I know the technology can already do.
So I have another question, Evan. The IP, the defensible IP, you and the team had foresight way back when to file essential patents, put those together in the portfolio, commercialize those, institutionalize those. As we continue to file these patents, me kind of having grown up at Qualcomm, I understand and appreciate that maybe better than others. But again, back to the patents and the dexterity of those patents to serve in the field of battle, and then in courts or field or diamonds or on the ice or near the pitch. Could you talk to us about that just a little bit?
Well, it's been one of the most wonderful collaborations that I've ever been a part of, to be honest with you, because we have this unique individual, Brian Lowry, that can listen to our ideas and see what's novel in that idea and be able to capture that in a way that it's written for the IP attorneys to then understand what it is. So, I mean, there's just this great process and journey that we've been on for the last, many years in building and filing these patents. But the core technology it was envisioned long ago. And, even before technology would enable us to be able to do it, it was just one of those unique things where it was so futuristic at the time. And we continue to do that. I mean, we're envisioning things, 5 years from now, 10 years from now that require IP that we're working on to, again, just to build value in our company.
So Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, years ago, it had not been considered a hotbed, but now we look where we are now. Facebook, Google, Amazon, all the FANGs are coming into Allegheny County, courting that talent from the universities that we mentioned. You made a decision to stay there. Did you ever have or was this a happy accident that Pittsburgh became this, I don't know, it's an Austin, it's a Tel Aviv,
It's always been a city of innovation. I mean, back in the late 1800s, there were more millionaires per capita here in Pittsburgh than anywhere else. And that was, it was the titans. It was the industrial titans that forged this city. So there was all of that kind of ingenuity. I think it's in the fabric of this city. People have always been hardworking, but always maybe wanting more. And I don't mean that in a sense of greed, but just, trying to make a better life for their kids, their family, for the city. And so, when I started thinking about where I might go, of course, who doesn't want to live on the West Coast? But, we just started looking at family and, my wife and I just said, this is a place that we want to raise a family. So, we really just have always had a special affinity for Pittsburgh and continue to do so. But fortunately, these big companies and other organizations have kind of looked at our history and they've said, what once was there could be there again. And I think we through the medical industry at, UPMC and Google coming to town and everybody, I think they too see these great educational institutions that are here in Pittsburgh. But more than that, they see the fabric of the community, and they know that if they get somebody who's from Pittsburgh, they're going to get the hardest working individual that they've ever had work for.
That grit and talent, or that combination of talent and grit, is embodied in the Steelers, is embodied in the Penguins, is embodied with the Pirates. It is, really small town mentality that is able to do things on a global scale. And that's what we at C360 are trying to be a shining example of that, which is we were, and probably still are, unintentionally the best, or less known. We're still a secret in the immersive media kind of economy. In a couple quarters, or certainly next year, I don't think that's going to be the case. Mm-hmm. Personalize this a little bit more. Evan, you had probably some dark days and some promising days, early raises, early successes and failures. What was your best day professionally, and what did you learn? And then what was your worst day professionally, and what did you learn as a result?
Wow, that's a great question. Nobody has actually ever asked me that.
And by the way, Cher, Evan and I talk probably on 4 or 5 Zooms per day, and then we text early in the morning, late at night. And I purposely have not asked him that question until right now to get this candid remark.
And Evan, this is like Howard's famous question. This is the go-to question in Icons and Insights. And definitely as we've developed this origin story, we really got to, our listeners really got an understanding of where C360 was, how it started, and where it's going. And so now, tell us the best and the worst day professionally.
So, there's been a lot of both. There's been a lot of great days, and there's been a lot of really, really rough days. But, I'd say probably the most challenging of all days was the day when, I decided to step aside as CEO. I think for me, that was, we had worked so hard and had so much, we had momentum, but just not to the level that we knew we needed. And so that was a really, really hard period. And that's not too far ago. I mean, that's, a year ago. But then I'm going to say the best day is, and I mean this, and I'm not just trying to say this, Howard, but when you saw in us everything that we had been trying to convince the industry with and said, I'm going to bring my, human capital experience and bring something to this company that's gonna help us not be the unknown immersive company. I mean, that was one, if not my best day. So I had to give up a lot in resigning and moving into a new role. I even had some damaged friendships as a result of that. So it was incredibly hard. But knowing that the end result is what we're all working towards, having you join the company is probably one of my brightest days that I would recall.
Oh, thank you for that, Evan. Cher, I want to close with two stories here. One, as I was getting recruited or interviewed to come up board and join C360, we had a 90-minute Zoom call scheduled with Evan and a couple other board members. And about 11 minutes into it, I said, this is the best kept secret, unintentional best kept secret in the immersive media economy, and I couldn't wait to join. And then the second part is, as they were selling the company to me, Evan in particular said, we have these testimonials and these support from individual X, individual Y, individual Z at the highest organizations in sports and media. And I wanted to believe him, Cher, but I only knew him for 11 minutes. So how could I possibly believe this guy? Every tech executive thinks that they have the recipe to Coke, or they have the secret sauce, or they have whatever it is. And lo and behold, the first 30 days, 45 days on the job, Evan and I went on a virtual tour with these very same partners. And they not only ratified what Evan had said, but they doubled down on it. Not only is it the best and the de facto standard, but now you have a chance to create derivatives of it. You can accelerate it. You can put higher fidelity into it. You can make a 5G product associated with your cameras and circumvent some of the coax cable and send it directly to the cloud. So again, happenstance, fate, kind of prepared Evan to build the company to where it was. Fate brought me involved and got a chance to meet Evan and the team. And lo and behold, he wasn't full of you-know-what. That the partners are clamoring for the type of technology that we provide.
Wow. Now that's a story. That's what you want to walk into as someone incoming in this position. And the last question I have for Evan is, what sort of advice do you have for someone like yourself who recognized that this was the time for this next phase of growth, and in order to create that opportunity and that growth in your company, you had to then find someone to replace you and find a different role for yourself as well. What do you have as advice to offer those CEOs that are now in this challenging position to say, oh my gosh, I have to do this too. What should I do?
Well, people would give a quick answer, say it takes tenacity and things of that nature. But, I think really at the end of the day, you have to care about the vision more than you care about yourself. And you have to be willing to learn every single day. And the minute that you stop paying attention to what's going on around you and you think you know the answer, or it's got to be your way or no way, then I think you have to really realize that there's a great deal of humility that you need to inject in that position. And I've seen people do it exceptionally well, and I've seen a lot of CEOs, not take that path. And so I think the greatest companies in the world have to have the vision, and that's one. But I think some of the greatest leaders in the world have to be willing to step aside when they feel like, they got to go to a new level, and they might not be the one that can, take them there.
Sure. You see why I joined?
Yes.
A co-founder, our chief business officer, our COO. He's the head of HR. He helps sometimes when folks are travel. He is ego-less and is focused on the mission and not the position. That's a rarefied, kind of evolved person, and I'm honored to call him a friend and a business partner.
Well, I can see where C360 is going as a result of just this collective leadership that's happening right here. And you can see the partnership between the two of you and why C360 is going to be so successful. And this, quite frankly, we got a lot of iconic insights from our icon for today. And Evan, thank you so much for joining us. This has definitely been a great walk down memory lane and also a vision into the future of what's possible in both the immersive media economy and, of course, with C360 right at the center, positioned for opportunity and excellence. So this is an exciting time to be with C360, and I'm looking forward to just that next level broadcast experience that our fans and everyone else has in store, along with all the other verticals that C360 is playing in. So for everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Icons and Insights, and definitely check us out on another episode.